Here's a question that should make every manufacturing and operations leader uncomfortable. Why do we spend millions every single year on new equipment, new technology, process improvements, but we rarely ever invest into the people that are actually leading our workforce? We say our people are our most vital and critical resource, but do our actions actually back that up? That ends today. Well, welcome back to the Frontline Leadership Podcast, where we help frontline leaders become professional leaders that transform their business bottom lines in the process. I'm your host, Craig Coyle, and today we're picking up right where we left off with our podcast launch series. In the first week, we talked about why so many new managers and frontline leaders struggle. Last week, we talked about how aviators are developed and a system that we could use to develop our frontline leaders. Today, we're going to talk about why it's so important that we do just that and what it costs us when we don't have that system in place. Ready? Let's dive in. Look, if you're a senior leader in manufacturing or operations, you've probably spent the last few years or maybe even the last decade battling some concerning industry-wide symptoms. Talent leaving faster than you can replace it, teams disengaged and underperforming, production challenges, quality challenges, maybe even safety challenges, but hopefully not. And here's what I keep hearing, and you've probably heard this too. It's a generational thing, right? It's the new reality of our industry. It's just something we have to navigate. It's nothing that we can control. And so maybe you've thrown some money at the issue, new incentives, hiring bonuses, recruiters to try and fill the gaps that are maybe exposing your organization. But do any of them really work over the long haul? Most people I talk to, they don't. Problems persist and it costs you, right? Production delays, turnover, missed opportunities, if not worse, issues. And I think here's what most leaders in the industry are missing. It's not a generational issue. I'm going to say that again. It's not a generational issue. It's not a labor market problem. And it's not really even a retention problem. It's a leader development problem. Better yet, it's a frontline leader development problem. And today, I'm going to show you exactly why that's the case, what it's costing you, and what you can do about it. Look, our industry is completely transformed in the last few decades, and a lot of it is for good. Automation, new technology, the global economy has expanded our reach to new customers, and we've benefited in a lot of ways, right? Our industry has evolved. We've cleaned up our workplaces. We've improved safety. We've increased pay. We've implemented some incredible process improvement and lean initiatives. But here's something that we've never changed: how we lead and manage our workforce. See, this used to work because it used to just be a game of numbers. I mean, think about the industry you grew up in, right? There was always a captive labor market. When there's a captive labor market, when there's essentially people lining up outside your door looking for a job, turnover really isn't an issue. People need to keep their jobs. And if they choose to leave, you have access to individuals to quickly close those gaps. But it seems like that game is over, right? The labor market has flattened. Regional and industry barriers are gone. And as it turns out, now the prospective employee or the employee that you currently have has the upper hand. In essence, the labor market hasn't only flattened, it's completely flipped. And here's what that means for most organizations. Most organizations have unknowingly found themselves playing a commodity game for labor. I mean, think about what that means in the market for our services or products. When we play a commodity game, we're competing with our competitors, other organizations, based on price. Whoever has the lowest price, unless their product is differentiated, is going to win the consumer. Well, that's essentially what we're doing for labor. And what are we competing over? We're ultimately competing over pay, benefits, and other perks. If you think about it, these are really just the basic needs, the expectations that an employee knows they will receive from an employer. And when we play this game, it's easy for an employee to want to up and leave and show little to no loyalty to an organization when they see better basic needs, better pay, better perks being offered to them at a different organization. See, you can't win a commodity game, especially not in the labor market. Why? Because there's always someone that's going to outbid you. There's always a bigger name willing to pay more, willing to give more in order to get the talent that's ultimately scarce today. But you can play a different game. And in order to play a different game, I want you to recall Maslow's hierarchy. Remember the pyramid and the different tiers? Well, at the bottom tiers are basic needs and physiological needs. And if you think about the employee, that's essentially what we're competing for them against, right? Our basic needs as an employee are pay, our perks, our benefits, health insurance, all these things. But what are things that you can offer to an individual that most companies aren't? Well, it's the upper tiers of Maslow's hierarchy. It's the belonging, the esteem, the self-actualization, the things that provide individuals fulfillment, purpose, growth, things that make them want to show up to your offices, to your floors, to your warehouses each and every day. When you understand how to tap into those tiers, those higher echelons of Maslow's hierarchy, and how to scale that across your organization, all of a sudden you break free from this commodity trap. So then the question becomes, how do you actually tap into those tiers, right? How do you break free from this war for talent so that people aren't just leaving your organization for $1 more an hour, but they're committed to your organization. They believe in your organization. They love being a part of your organization. Well, here's the truth that I think most senior leaders either don't want to hear or choose not to hear. You don't. You, the senior leader, you aren't the one that can tap into those tiers. Your frontline leaders do. Why? Well, because your frontline leaders are your culture. They create your culture. Yes, you as a senior leader, you can influence your culture, but you don't create it. Your frontline leaders do. Think about it. I mean, your frontline leaders in most industrial operations-heavy organizations, frontline leaders and mid-level managers are directly managing, guiding, directing 80 to 90% of the workforce. And if our culture is ultimately the byproduct of the relationships in our organization, who has more influence on those relationships than the people directly in charge of a majority of the organization? They, your frontline leaders, determine whether an employee's upper tier needs, those cravings for belonging and fulfillment and purpose, are being met. But here's the challenge. Of those populations of frontline leaders and managers, how many of them actually know how to tap into those needs? Better yet, how many of them have been taught how to tap into those needs? How many of them know that one of the most critical responsibilities of their role is to fill those needs for the employees on their team? See, most organizations, and it's natural to do this, we're going to fill those positions for frontline leadership based off technical expertise, so tenure or some combination of both. But when we leave the skill set of empowering and providing purpose to our teams up to chance, we leave our culture up to chance. And when we leave our culture up to chance, everything tied to our culture is ultimately up to chance. Positive, engaged, results-driven cultures don't happen by accident. You create them. You craft them. You build them intentionally by investing into the leaders that create them. Here's where things get really interesting. And that's when you start to look into the research and the data that's tied to this whole concept. Gallup is one of the organizations that's done a ton of research on this. I'll share some of those statistics with you guys now. Only 23% of US employees, industry agnostic, only 23% of US employees are engaged in their work. So what does that mean? Well, good chances are in your organization today, 8 out of 10 people are clocking in, clocking out. What does that mean? Well, once they sniff $1 more an hour down the road, where do you think they're going? Do you think they're actually committed to meeting the performance goals, the challenging performance goals you've laid before them, knowing they're going to get their work, knowing they're going to get their paycheck regardless? Here's where it gets really interesting. 70% of the variance of team engagement is directly contributed to the influence of the direct manager. Not the influence of the CEO, not the influence of the executive suite. No, the direct manager. In other words, frontline leaders can influence the engagement on their team by 70%. They create our culture. Not our HR policies, not the benefits package or the pay package you give employees, not the mission statement on the wall or the speech the CEO or the general manager gives on a Friday afternoon. Our frontline leaders. They possess the keys to the health of our organizations. And here's, I think, where most organizations get stuck, because everybody knows that retention matters, right? We understand that the people we have are going to influence our production, they're going to influence our quality, it's going to influence our safety, right? And if we have gaps there, it's going to negatively influence our organization. But what I think most organizations don't realize is there's a whole sequence of events, a sequence of influence, if you will, of things connecting to each other that's at play here. And it can either benefit you or it can hurt you. And there's really one or two ways I see this play out. There's a negative cycle where supervisors don't know how to lead, and so consequentially, their teams disengage. When their teams are disengaged, they're checking in, checking out. You're going to have a natural tendency for higher turnover because people are going to get offers to work at other places that are willing to pay more, provide better perks like we've talked about. Now, inherently, that means you have to spend more money to fill those gaps, and you have to ask more of less people to still meet the demands of their production. Those people are disengaged, so they're less committed to creating great results for your organization, which inherently means your performance isn't going to change. It's probably going to slip. Quality is probably going to hurt from the result of this whole sequence. And unfortunately, you're going to be more susceptible to safety issues. Now, what happens if we flip the script? Let's look at what the positive side looks like. Strong frontline leaders create engagement. They give people purpose, clarity, support. When people have that, they love coming to work. They're not looking at other offers because they know that other organizations can't provide the things that just can't be written into a policy or expressed on paper that your organization provides them. They're committed to you. And so your performance increases because they have goals and they're willing to do what it takes to meet them. Because they're engaged, you're less likely to see quality issues. And you're less likely to see safety incidents. Better retention means consistency. Teams get stronger, production improves, and your business grows as a result. And guess what? There's more data to support this. Gallup found companies with high engagement experience 59% less turnover. Engaged organizations are 21% more profitable and 17% more productive. And safety incidents, and this is the one that really hits up. Safety incidents decrease by up to 70%, 70%, when leadership improves. Guys, this isn't soft skills. This is business performance. It all starts with one thing: the quality of our frontline leaders. Most companies are going to stay stuck fighting these symptoms, fighting the symptom of retention, or fighting the system of poor performance, or fighting the system of high quality escapes. But the great organizations see that the root cause, the source of all these issues, is the quality of our frontline leaders. Now, most of you are probably sitting here thinking, Craig, look, we have leadership training, and I hear you. And I'm grateful that you do. Most organizations, thankfully, do have some form of leader development. But the question is it working? Because if you're still seeing disengagement, if you're still struggling with retention, if you're still struggling with performance issues, then there's two things to take away. One is your leadership development tied to actual business outcomes. How do you know it's working if it's not? And two is if your leadership training isn't working, then what are you willing to do about it? And why isn't it working? See, the issue isn't that you don't have training. The issue is that the training doesn't exist within a system that works. And this is the trap most organizations fall into. Most organizations bring people in to facilitate leadership workshops. They have some form of a mentorship program, informal, maybe some coaching, because they feel like they have to have that. They promote within. Maybe they create a buddy system so that people are paired up with senior supervisors, helping that there's some learning through osmosis. But here's why none of that works. Really, there's three reasons why none of it works. One is most of the time they're unplanned or informal events, not systems within a whole ecosystem of events and accountability and relationship. And when things aren't part of an intentional system, they tend to not stick. And that's why we all hear it, that most leadership training goes through one ear and out the other. The second is that most of these programs are way too generic. And look, I'm the first person to tell you that leadership is industry agnostic. All the principles that you learn as a new leader will apply to whatever industry, whatever leadership role you go to. But here's the challenge: as a new leader, you don't always have enough of a skill set built up to be able to translate these skills, these principles into application for your real world job in the industry today. You need a bridge. And that's what we need within these ecosystems, within these development initiatives that we have. They just can't be generic. We have to translate them. We have to lead these new leaders to success intentionally, every step along the way. And three, I don't think they address the root cause. See, most leadership trainings, leadership initiatives are here to provide knowledge. But research time and again shows us that knowledge isn't necessarily the issue with leadership failures. Most of us know what we could or should be doing. So the challenge isn't knowledge. The challenge is the application of knowledge. The challenge is whether or not we're able to go out and do that each and every day, whether we have the support to do it each and every day, whether we know how to go out and apply this knowledge each and every day. And here's what really happens. We promote into new leadership. We're excited. We're motivated. We're committed to make a difference. But 60 to 90 days in, reality hits, right? And we're drowning. A manager is breathing down our back. We don't have enough time to answer all the emails stacking up in our inbox. And we end up firefighting each and every day. And guess what falls off the table? The very things we need to do in order to invest in and engage the folks on our team. That's the gap. That's why good companies, time and time again, especially today, continue to get stuck. And let's talk about what this is actually costing you. Most leaders think about turnover and see it as a frustrating inconvenience, unless it's literally causing their production floor to stop. But according to SHRM, this has tangible financial impact to our organizations. Replacing an employee costs 33% on average that employee's salary. So someone making 50 grand in salary would cost over 16 grand to replace. Now, if you have 200 people in your organization and your turnover's at say 20%, that's 40 people you have to replace, which amounts to about $640,000 impacting your bottom line. Now, maybe you think 20% is high, but even reduce that to 10, cut it in half, which is actually a healthy level of turnover for organizations when people are promoting out of the organization. And that's still over $300,000 being taken off your bottom line. But that's just the direct cost. What about the indirect costs? What about the production delays that are costing you? The quality escapes, the safety incidences? We talked about those already. But here's what most people don't even get to talking about. The opportunity cost. How does this impact you and your ability to lead and navigate your organization? When I speak a lot about how being a senior leader of an organization is like being the pilot on a plane. Your job is to do what only you can do. It's to fly the plane, lead your organization. You would never expect on a flight the pilot to come into the cabin and start serving you coffee and refreshments. No, you want him up there in the cockpit, flying the controls, safely navigating the aircraft. But what happens when you're pulled into your organization? Firefighting, dealing with performance issues, dealing with retention issues. You're being pulled into the cabin of your organization, and you're not able to focus on and put all your effort and attention into what only you're capable of doing. Look, according to Gallup, companies lose over $1 trillion annually due to voluntary turnover. And 60% of employees directly point to their first line supervisor as the reason for why they're leaving a job. That's powerful. And it's controllable if we choose to see it that way. So here's my question for you. How much is this costing you? How much is it costing your organization? How long can you afford to continue to let this impact you, impact your team, and impact your bottom line? Because I'll tell you what, the companies that figure this out are going to be the companies that thrive. They're going to be the companies that attract talent, retain talent, and scale. And the rest will stay stuck. But here's the good news. You don't need a new workforce. And this isn't a generational thing. It's a strategic opportunity for you to take advantage of today. Look, this is a market realignment that's just simply exposing the way that we've managed our workforce for years. But it's only your opportunity if you take advantage of it. Very few companies are doing this well. Very few organizations are strategically investing into their frontline leadership, knowing and clearly seeing the tangible business outcomes tied to doing it well. That means if you do it, if you build a system that consistently, repeatedly, and predictably develops professional frontline leaders, you're going to distance yourself from all of the other people that are looking for talent. Look, you become a company that people want to work for, a company that people choose to stay at, and you develop a culture that is unparalleled and magnetic. And here's what happens. Your retention becomes your profit level. Your team stabilize, your profits increase, and your business grows. Your leadership pipeline starts to fill itself because people are committed to your organization and want to do more to continue to be a part of it. And you, as a senior leader, you get to focus on what only you can do. Get to fly the plane. And your company is going to be better off because of it. That's how good companies become great companies. By empowering all the people to do what only they can do. By recognizing the quality of the frontline leaders, developing them to be professional leaders, creating a culture that attracts, retains, and promotes. So what does this actually look like? We talked about it in depth in episode 2 last week, and we'll cover some of the key points here briefly for you today. Well, just like pilots, your frontline leaders they need 3 things. First, they need a standardized onboarding tied to real expectations. This is the idea of our flight school tied with our pre-flight, right? We need to teach them the skills, the mindsets, the principles that they're going to need to be successful as leaders, but then we also have to provide a bridge for them and give them a clear direction on what it looks like to apply this in their role each and every day. Second, they need real-time coaching and feedback loops tied to how we're intentionally growing them. Not informal mentoring that's off the cuff and unplanned, but real-time, tangible coaching and feedback, just like a pilot has his instructor. And last, thirdly, they need relationships that support growth and accountability. You can't do this alone. Just like any hard change or new habit that we're trying to build, we need the support of those around us to lean on when things get hard so that we don't lose our way. That's what the Lead Like a Pilot framework is all about. We discussed it in depth last week. When you apply it to your frontline leaders, they don't just manage, they lead. And when they lead, everything starts to change in your organization from the ground up. So here's what I want you to do right now. Look, if you're a senior leader, I want you to stop for a second and ask yourself this question. Are we intentionally and systematically developing our frontline leaders, or are we just hoping that they figure it out? And look, if you're the frontline leader yourself listening to this, ask yourself, am I a part of an intentional system that's developing me? Or am I having to figure it out on my own? Look, regardless of what your answer is to that question, I encourage you all to visit us at our website, operationlead.com/retention, In our guide, The Hidden Cause of Disengagement, Turnover, and Stalled Performance is essentially this episode on steroids. It's going to dive deep into the data, into the costs, and into the importance of our frontline leaders, and then how to empower them to become the professional leaders that we need them to be. Look, if while you're there, you're ready to take action and take advantage of this opportunity today, there's this option for you to request a discovery call of no cost, no pressure, just an opportunity for us to have a discussion, for you to share where you're at, where you'd like to go, and for us to provide you some direction on that journey. But here's the truth. Every great organization has one thing in common. They develop their leaders intentionally and systematically, not accidentally. Here's what I want you to remember from today. Turnover, disengagement, and stalled performance, they're not random. They're predictable outcomes. They're symptoms of a deeper problem. A workforce that isn't being led well. When you fix that problem, when you build a system that develops the people leading them, everything changes. Retention increases, engagement improves, performance climbs, and your business grows. Last week, we talked about how aviators are developed and how we can use that system to develop our leaders. This week, we talked about why it matters and what it costs if we don't do that. Next week, we're going to dive deeper into this idea of culture, the role our frontline leaders play in our culture, and how to empower them to influence it in a way that benefits our organizations in a way that lasts. Until then, remember this. Pilots don't wing it. Doctors don't guess. Engineers don't figure it out as they go. Neither should you, and neither should your frontline leaders. I'm Craig Coyle. This is the Frontline Leadership Podcast. Let's do it.